there'll be bits and pieces that we skip, just for the simple fact that we have done them previously in the holiday class, and you'll have to just watch that one. Hopefully you can hear me, because all I can hear is them. Sorry about that. No one told me, but I'm glad it's going. Okay, I'm going to have to shout. So essentially, we finished off here at gas. I was finished off just before this slide. Just so you're aware, gas is usually, hey, come back. Fancy with it. Gas is usually asked in the exam. Make sure you know it. There are certain things that are released at certain times which you need to know. They're cutting down the tree awfully close to my car. All right, so the first stage is the alarm reaction. So you're first aware of the stressor. My advice would be to look at it from the perspective of like the exams, right? Or maybe something that maybe you're hearing bad news. So you've heard bad news and you go into a temporary state of shock. So you go, oh my God, what's happened? And you just don't know what to do. And literally everything just drops, right? And that's why if you're going to tell someone bad news, you should always do it with them sitting down. Then what happens is as the person processes what's happened, they go into what's known as counter shock. So it goes down and then all of a sudden it goes straight back up again, right? And that's when they start having like the sympathetic nervous system kicks in. So the flight, fight, freeze response. And then you start going into adrenaline being released and the heart and breathing rate increases, right? Then you have stage 2, which is resistance, right? And this is pretty much when you haven't dealt with the stress. So I like to use the whole idea of a family funeral. Let's say, for example, I'm going to say my grandma, because she's already dead and I don't have to think. So let's say, for example, my grandma has just died. In the alarm reaction, I'd be, oh my God, it just happened. It just happened. What do I do? Right? In the counter shock, it'd be sort of like, oh, okay, so she's died. And then resistance would be, all right, how do I deal with her death? How do I deal with the funeral arrangements? All that sort of stuff, right? This is when cortisol is released, and that's just try to get you to maintain that level of coping and to help you to cope with the stress. Then you get to exhaustion, and this is when, if the stressor isn't removed, so let's say, for example, you happen to, not only has my grandmother just died, then all of a sudden my dog gets sick. And then I have to mark exams, and then I have to do all these other things. So it's just having stress upon stress upon stress as we keep going, right? So you're entering the exhaustion phase, right? And your ability to deal with the stress starts to go down, right? And that's when you start to get sick, you start to have, you're very tired and you have high levels of anxiety. Right, so my advice is always to do this graph here. Know how to draw it, right? Literally, when you're, talking on the phone, practice it, right? I know you won't do it, but still, right? So it goes into shock first, right? And that goes below your level of normal functioning, right? And then it starts going up into counter shock, and then it keeps going down to resistance, hits its peak, and then as the stress continues, it starts to go down, and as it gets worse and worse and worse, right, you start going to exhaustion, and you go well below your normal levels of stress, or normal resistance to stress. So note the fact, oh my gosh, it's so loud. Let's say, for example, right, here, right, it is actually smaller. I really hope you guys can hear me, right? Right, you've got it right here, but it goes further down, So when you're actually copying this particular graph, and they have asked 1 year for kids to draw it, right? So you'll see that it's only just below normal levels, right? And your blood pressure and all that sort of stuff drops. But in exhaustion stage, if you get to exhaustion stage, not everybody does, it starts to go down. All right. I added these to the original PowerPoint because it actually talks about, oh my gosh, I can hardly hear myself. It actually talks about the different stages and what's being released. So I would recommend putting them into your notes. And this particular slide in general is actually quite good. I'd recommend copy, paste, stick it into your notes. All right, so Celier's gas. It is one of the first to link stress to disease. They actually worked out that if you have high levels of stress, you are more likely to get sick. And this is true. Towards your exam time, you guys are going to get sick. It's going to happen. And that's because you've got exam after exam after exam, and your cortisol levels are going to be so high, but too much cortisol weakens the immune system, right? So as you have exam on the Monday, exam on the Tuesday, exam on the Thursday or whatever, right, you're going to have more and more cortisol being released, but your body's not going to be able to cope with it, so you're going to get sick. The strength of Cellier over Lazarus is it looks at the biological. Lazarus looks at the psychological. We already looked at Lazarus on the holiday class. It has 3 phases common to all stresses. So he's worked out that most people go through those stages. Right? They incorporated that exhaustion phase after they worked out that, you know, people started getting sick. Other models don't do that, and they didn't initially. Limitations, it assumes that everybody is the same. So what you might find stressful and what the next person might find stressful is going to be completely different. I actually didn't know my grandmother, so knowing that, you know, she passed away didn't have any effect on me. My dad, on the other hand, different story, right? So it's not a one size fits all, so that's an issue. It overlooks the roles of the bodily systems, so it doesn't look at the endocrine system and glands and hormones and all that sort of stuff. And it doesn't look at cognitive viewpoints, so how each of you sees stress. All right, I'm not going to do Lazarus because we already did it. Does anyone have any questions about gas? Any questions? No? Okay. No. Sorry, something happened. Alrighty, I'm not going to do, because we did Lazarus. All right. All right, so coping with stress. And this is something you may want to start to employ, right? Essentially, you need to find strategies to help you to cope with stress. And it could be something as simple as, you know, spending time to do, you know, things for yourself or whatever. So if it actually helps you to overcome the issue, it's considered to be a context-specific effectiveness, right? So the type of method that you're using to cope with the stress matches the stress. So for example, if you have a big test coming up, the best strategy would be to, I don't know, study for it, right? Actually not thinking about it and going, well, it's next Thursday, I don't need to worry about it, I'm just going to, you know, study on the Wednesday. That would be bad, right? So it'd be ineffective. All right. Sometimes just studying for a SAC or exam or whatever is not enough. You need to do other things. You need to be able to modify the way you actually cope with the stress. And it could be, okay, you're studying for the exam, but you're going, but I'm still stressed. What do I do? Something's just been hit. What do I do? Do I actually continue the same way, or do I find a different way of studying, or do I find a different way of coping with the stress? So people with high coping flexibility, they're able to change their strategy. So if taking a walk is not, relieving your stress, maybe, watching a movie could be one. It's not going to be very effective with your exam, but still. People with low coping flexibility, they tend to stick with one strategy and that's it. They don't look at anything else, right? High coping flexibility, you tend to cope with stress pretty well. Exercise can be helpful because it actually uses up those hormones that produce stress. If you're healthy, you're more likely to feel more positive about yourself and helps you to cope with future stresses. It has better endorphins, which help with relaxation, and it's a distraction from the stressor, which is true. There are two different types of strategies. Approach coping strategies, you tend to confront it. I have a sack, I must study, so you do it. Avoidance coping strategies tend to deal with it indirectly. So you're stressing about an exam, but instead of actually dealing with it, you're actually doing other things, which is not a good approach to take. You've got one more stack to go, don't give up now. And there's a few examples I've added here. Approach focus could be, all right, I want to make, I want to move the company forward, I want to be productive, I'll get funding. Avoidance focus, I'll avoid having the company fail, but it doesn't actually say how. I will avoid slacking off so my boss doesn't bother me. I don't slack off, my boss still bothers me. But either way, it is better to do approach strategies than avoidance. You're more likely to get, achieve your goals if you're actually approaching them positively. I don't recommend it. Alrighty, you can do the exam questions. They're pretty much there anyway. All right, give me a sec. Going through them. It's very long. I apologize. All right, tips. You need to know the difference between primary and secondary appraisal. So Lazarus and Folkman. Remember, primary appraisal is going, is this stressful? Is this harmful? Is it a threat? Is it a loss? Is it a challenge? And secondary is, okay, so what resources do I have to cope with it? How can I deal with this stress? Eustress and distress are still stresses, but eustress is positive, distress is negative. Both, however, are associated with the sympathetic nervous system. So even if you have, you've just won $20 million, which is what I'm hoping for tonight, it would be the sympathetic nervous system if I win. It'd still kick in. The flight, fight, freeze would still kick in. Understand the flight, fight, freeze response and the HPA axis, which we've gone through before. Remember flight, fight response. And I know some of you mentioned or did the flight, fight, freeze response, but you need to relate it to a phobia. And a lot of you just said it is this. You run away or you fight the issue. That doesn't answer the question. You need to make sure that you relate it to the article. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, right? You need to make sure that you can say, all right, the flight, fight, freeze response is triggered by the sympathetic nervous system, whereby it prepares the body for action by doing this, 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 and this, right? You have to be specific, and a lot of you did not do that. Right, so make sure that you actually go through it. I have given feedback. I don't know whether or not it's live yet. Sorry about that. I'll fix it up before I go. The HPA axis, make sure you know about the pituitary gland. There was a flow chart I've got you to look at. Make sure you go through those and know them off by heart. You need to know the 3 stages of gas. It's not brand new this year. This is an older PowerPoint that I just update each year. With gas, I like to go ARE, which is alarm, resistance, exhaustion. All right, questions about that stuff? Okay, so neural basis of learning and memory. There's some areas that we did already, so I'm just going to be skipping some of these as well, but there's some that we didn't. So when we're looking at neurons, you need to make sure that neurons aren't static. They will change over time depending on how you've, well, nurtured them, how you've actually been able to form connections, and this is neuroplasticity. So it changes throughout the lifespan, usually through experience. So if you're learning something new today, you shouldn't be, I've taught you all of it, right? If you're learning something new today, it means that neuroplasticity is still working for you, right? And it'll work throughout your entire life. That old saying, old dogs can't learn new tricks, is a lie. Old dogs can learn new tricks and old humans can still learn. It just takes longer, right? So neuroplasticity is the basis of learning and memory. During learning and memory, changes occur at the synapse. So how fast it gets moved from one neuron to the next is where it changes, and this is synaptic plasticity. Right, so it changes over time. Right. When neural connections are actually firing off together, right, they tend to strengthen. So let's say, for example, right now you're relearning information I've already taught. So in theory, your neurons in your brain that are associated with, psychology, this information here, actually get stronger and stronger each time you go over them. And that's why I recommend doing, practice exams and do as many as you possibly can, right? If you say, Miss, I've done this one, I will give you another one, right? The more practice questions you do and the more you get wrong, the more you're going to go over it and go, all right, I need to fix this, I need to fix this, I need to fix this. Same with the hurdle tasks. I've given you the feedback. You should be going back and going, all right, I got this wrong. I'm going to go now work out why I got it wrong. And I've given little tips on it. But you need to do that because it strengthens the neural pathways. Right, so as you keep learning it and learning it, the stronger they get. And this is whole idea that if they're stronger, the neurons that will fire together will wire together. So the more you learn it and the more neural connections are made, right, the more connected they're going to be. So it's going to be easier to recall that information. And you're not going to be sitting in an exam going, oh my God, I am so in trouble. Miss didn't teach us this, Miss did. I don't want to know that. I did, I taught you. Anyway, so Hebb's rule is neurons that fire together, wire together. And this is pretty much what we're going from. So long-term potentiation is that neurons that fire together, wire together, right? It's a long-lasting strengthening of synaptic connections. So it's pretty much saying that, right, if you keep going over and over and over and over and over information again and again and again and again and again, right, those two neurons are going to be connecting with one another, right? And the more revision you do, the more connections that are made to those neurons, the faster it's going to be. And it's going to be a long-lasting strengthening of those synaptic connections. And that's long-term potentiation, right? So this is why I keep saying, all right, do revision tables or whatever. And I've given you quite a few of them. Do the practice exams, add examples. If you get something wrong, do that question again. Because we're trying to build out that long-term potentiation. We're trying to strengthen your neural connections so then that way, when you have to recall it in the exam, you are going to get better and better and better at it. And it's going to be quicker. And what you should do, let's say, for example, you've got exam number 1, which I've given you, right? What you should be doing is going, okay, I got question this, and this wrong, right? What you do next is you go through those answers and all the wrong ones you actually do again. Then you get the second exam and you'll find that you'll do better the second time. And then you'll get those answers wrong and you do those again. And then you keep going and keep going and keep going, right? And that's long-term potentiation. Long-term depression is the opposite. So it's the decrease in strength and synaptic connections. So what's happening there is as you leave high school, there is going to be information that you will never, ever learn or use again. There are things that, we taught you that are absolutely useless. I'm telling you now, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, some of the stuff we teach you, you will never use. And what's going to happen, I know, shock horror, it's if you didn't know. Long-term depression is that gradual decrease in the strength between neural connections. So things like, I don't know, I'd like to say locker combination, but I still remember my locker combination. Things like, I don't know, adjectives. Do you really need to know what an adjective actually is? You don't. As long as you can, you know, speak and write, you don't really need to know what an adjective is until after you go and start becoming a teacher. So, long-lasting decrease of synaptic connection, long-term depression. So because they're no longer being stimulated, you're going to lose it. Where it comes into the whole idea of use it or lose it. So as you stop using the word adjectives in your notes and, you know, what is the theme of this book, right, you're going to lose it. So this is pretty much what it is. It's, all right, so essentially what it's showing is, and I think I put this in just for the simple fact that I saw it in an exam, I think 2014, 2015, right? So you can see these they're the presynaptic neurons. As you continually revise for your SAC, as you should be doing, right, more and more information is going to be passed to the postsynaptic neuron, which is the B. Right, this one here, this is how much, it's the exact same as this one here. Right, this is your information about adjectives. Right, but as you leave school, you don't need it in university, maybe during an engineering course, they'll never ask you about adjectives. You start to lose that information. I still don't get the whole thing of adverbs. I was taught it, I just don't remember it. Who needs it? All right. What you need to know between these two concepts, neurotransmitters are chemical messages that are released into the synaptic gap. So they're from neuron to neuron. Neurohormones are released into the bloodstream, and then they're carried to other neurons. Neurohormones take longer, right? So they're going to take longer to actually pass along because they have to go from a neuron through the bloodstream to another neuron or cell. Right? Neurotransmitters go straight to another neuron, so they're very quick. Glutamate. Hopefully you guys have remembered that glutamate means go. Right? So it is the main excitatory neurotransmitter. You have to use the words excitatory neurotransmitter, and it makes it more likely to fire. It is very important in synaptic plasticity, and it strengthens synaptic connections, so it's going to play a part in long-term potentiation. If you have low levels of glutamate, you're going to have long-term depression, right? And they won't fire as often. Right? We won't talk about the rest of it. Okay. Adrenaline, and we did have this conversation. I remember Eric mentioned it before about adrenaline, especially with emotional memories. So adrenaline is very important when we're looking at emotional memories and the consolidation of memories. Right? Remember, consolidation takes 30 minutes. So if you happen to, let's say, for example, right after this class, I'm going to go step outside and a tree branch hits me on the head, right? Whatever I've learned in maybe even the past hours or whatever I taught you, I will forget because it takes 30 minutes for consolidation to occur. And so you won't remember what's actually happened. But adrenaline speeds up that process. So let's say, for example, it was a very emotional class we had today, and I wasn't just talking to a blank screen or a little blinking light, right? And it was very emotional. There's a good chance that consolidation will go faster because adrenaline actually came into play. So let's say, for example, that did happen. It's usually if adrenaline's released, then epinephrine's going to be released afterwards, which is noradrenaline, which goes into the amygdala, and it will speed up the consolidation process. Could do questions, blah, blah, blah. Okay. All right. Neuroplasticity is the basis of learning and memory. They're going to ask that question quite a bit. So they're going to ask about long-term potentiation and long-term depression. They will ask, it will be heavily examined, but not as much as memory and learning, I don't think. Understand how glutamate affects long-term potentiation, so it increases it, makes it more likely to fire. Be able to explain the role of adrenaline in consolidating emotional memory, so it speeds up the adrenaline process through the amygdala. You need to be specific, so what parts of the brain are actually being triggered. Long-term depression is new, not this year, previous year, and the less glutamate you have, the more likely it is that, the less likely it is that your neurons are going to fire, leading to long-term depression. All right, there's some bits here that we don't need. So does anyone have any questions about that? Nothing. Okay, so we did have a look at learning and classical conditioning last time during the holiday session, so we won't be looking at that, which is good because it gets through quite a bit. Oh, we are going to talk about this though. Okay, so I read the hurdle task. I'm very concerned. All right. A lot of you got at least 1 mark for stating that, the 3-phase model of operant conditioning is the antecedent at the start, which pretty much says, okay, this is what has happened before the behavior occurs, such as me asking you to, do your homework. Behavior is the voluntary behavior that the individual does, so the action, so you actually do your homework, and then the consequence is going to be whether or not, I give you good mark or bad mark because you did it. So a lot of you got that bit, and that's fine, but it was asking, if it's actually relating to the article, you need to say, all right, so what is the antecedent? What is the behavior? What is the consequence of that article? There was a reason why we gave that article to you. All right, and some of you actually did this question quite well. Some of you need to go back over it, and I'd recommend that you look at the article and go, all right, so why did so-and-so have a fear of whatever? I'm not allowed to be specific because we used that article. Right? What started it all? What is the behavior that that person displays? And what is the consequence of that behavior? Does the fear increase or decrease? Right? So avoidance behavior is one of those ones. So you may want to look at that again. All right. Okay. I wanted to just double check. I actually added this little slide in, a little picture in. So examples of response cost. I know we did this in the holiday session. It would be traffic fines to reduce speeding or parking violations. So the consequence doesn't actually relate so much to what the actual the actual behaviour was. Yardage penalty in football to decrease number of rule violations, fee to reduce checking, bouncing. I stole this from the internet. Salary decrease to, for the number of days absent. Oh, I'd be in trouble. Loss of free time to reduce number of classroom rule violations. They don't necessarily have to do with the behaviour. You're just giving them a consequence that is negative to them. All right. I've done all that stuff. All right, we didn't do observational learning. So, observational learning, from my recollection, most of you got this right in the task we did last term. Well, not last term, the term before. Essentially, you're observing somebody else's behaviour, but in observational learning, you call them a model. Right, so if you're observing somebody, you're observing a model. right? And you're looking at their consequences to guide your own behavior later on. So Bandura was the one that really was the focus of this one. Vicarious conditioning pretty much means that you're watching somebody else get reinforced or punished, whatever, right? So let's say, for example, Hayley watches Thea get, $10 from me for doing her homework, and then goes, oh, hello, if I do my homework, I'll get $10, right? That's vicarious condition. So she's learnt by watching Thea as a model and the consequences she receives in order to get, change her own behavior. Vicarious reinforcement is sort of like a subheading of that one. So when you're observing somebody else get reinforced, so I gave Thea $10, right? You're going to behave in a similar way, so you get $10, right? You haven't been told that I'm going to give you $10, but you believe it because Thea did, right? Punishment could be, because, fair is fair, I happen to, I'm not going to say, let's just say, let's say every time Thea doesn't do her homework, I'm going to hit her. I won't hit you, I promise, I'll never hit someone, right? So vicarious punishment, every single time Thea doesn't do her homework, I'm going to hit her, and it's going to decrease the likelihood that Hayley's not going to do it. Decrease the likelihood that Hayley's not going to do her homework because she's afraid that she might get hit. I would never hit someone, just on the record here. Hitting people bad. All right, just making sure. All right. So you need to know the 5 processes in observational learning. I'm just keeping an eye on the time. So for attention, you must pay close attention to the model's behavior, and it has a couple of different influences. So let's say, for example, if you're a girl, you're more likely to follow a girl. If you're a boy, you're more likely to follow a boy. If they happen to be, attractive, you're more likely to follow them. Sorry about that. The situation, you're more likely to pay attention when that's the whole thing. So right now, you're less likely to pay attention to me with the noise going on in the background than what you would if we were quieter. It's the same sort of thing. You're less likely to pay attention to me now than what you would in class, which has been problematic for some of you. Whatever. Perceptual capabilities, if you actually can observe somebody, then it's, very important. And you're more likely to pay attention to someone who has power. Hopefully that's me. So the next section is retention. You have to be able to memorize what's actually happened and remember what the model did. The more meaningful it can be, the better the observation. And that is why I tend to give examples. Right, so when I give examples in class, I like to give as many of my personal ones as possible, because you're more likely to retain that information. Go, what's Miss Sarah being afraid of? Hey, tell me, what is the one thing that I have a phobia of?
Spiders.
Yeah, see, you remember. That's retention, baby. That's retention. Alrighty, so I'm just making sure you're awake. So if I can make it more meaningful to you, and I try to, you're more likely to remember it. All right, so reproduction is you being able to reproduce this, and hopefully you'll be able to reproduce all this information, right, and put into practice during your SAC and your exam. You won't do it perfectly the first time. Hence the reason why I keep saying, do practice exams. You do the first exam, right, and you're based on information that you've learnt from me, and then you go and do it a second time, and you keep practicing, and that's the reproduction side to things, right? Motivation is the 4th one, and it's pretty much you must be motivated to actually perform the behaviour, to actually complete what I've, taught you. If you have no interest in karate, there's a good chance that you're not going to copy it. Also, reinforcement is that incentive, right? So let's say, for example, with karate, a lot of people keep doing it because they believe that they'll go to the next belt, and that's a reinforcement. Sometimes in VCAR exams, they put motivation and reinforcement together, right? You can separately or you can put them together. Either way works, but more often than not, they actually put the motivation reinforcement together, but there are still 5 components. It's weird. I like to remember it this way. So remember the order of observational learning model by remembering model your armor so people can observe you. So you remember the observational model is armor. Attention, retention, reproduction, motivation, reinforcement. I don't know how you're going to remember which order their R's are in, but still, I'm there for you. All right. Bandura was the most famous observational learning theorists, and he pretty much used preschool students. And what he did is he got a Bobo doll, and I'm really disappointed in myself that I didn't blow one up. I have one. Anyway, so the children were split into 3 groups, and they all watched a movie of a man punching and hitting a large inflated doll. At the end of the movie, there were differences. After, in group 1, they saw that the man was rewarded with lollies. Group 2 saw the model actually being punished and spanked with verbal criticisms. They literally had, this guy over his knee, and they did a spank on the bum. So funny. Anyway, group 3 saw the man get neither rewarded or punished. And you can pretty much assume that when they entered the room, group 1 were automatically going to start, hitting and punching the Bobo doll because they believed that they were going to get rewarded. So they had learned through vicarious reinforcement. Group 2 saw vicarious punishment, and they were less likely to hit the doll. Group 3 pretty much copied the behaviour because they weren't taught that that's actually bad behaviour. So it was not as aggressive as the first group, but it was close to it. Learning exams, you can do them yourself, blah, 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 blah. All right. All right, so learning tips. It is heavily examined. I'm not going to lie to you, it is. Particularly multiple choice. You need to do those scenarios of, classical conditioning and actually go through the before, during, and after conditioning using all the correct terminology, like, UCS, all that sort of stuff. Learn the map or the formula, how you go, okay, so what's the NS, what's the UCS, what's the UCR, right? Make sure you know it and just can repeat it. Reinforcement always aims to strengthen the behaviour. Punishment always aims to weaken the behaviour, and know the difference between positive and negative. So many people get that wrong. So they think that negative reinforcement is a bad thing. Negative reinforcement is when you are essentially going, okay, I'm going to take away something unpleasant. So right now, I would like to be negatively reinforced by someone taking away those trees because I've been good. Please. Anyway, moving on. Do examples, scenarios. I've been telling you this from day 1. Able to explain the ethical guidelines for little Albert. Don't overcomplicate things. Use examples that you've used throughout your entire life. The ones I've given you are the most simpler. Alrighty, what time is it? 2:40. I'll go to 2:45. Memory can be defined as the processing, storage, and retrieval of information gained through learning. There are many different models to explain, but Atkinson and Shiffrin is usually the most common model. When they ask the question, what are the 3 key processes? So this bit here. They're talking about encoding, storage, and retrieval of information. When they're looking at the models of memory, they're talking about Atkinson. So this is how I've sort of broken it down. So sensory memory goes to short-term memory, which goes to long-term memory. And I tend to remember it as lip and leads. So long-term memory gets broken up into implicit and procedural, technically also classical conditioning, but okay. And long-term memory, explicit memory, gets broken up into semantic and episodic. Mnemonics, use them, don't use them, up to you. All right. I'm going to tell you right now that you need to know what the duration capacity was for each of the memory stores. So sensory, iconic memory is for visual information, and it's 0.2 to 0.4 seconds. Echoic is about 3 to 4 seconds, and it's auditory. And essentially all the information that's coming in and everything's coming in at the same time is sensory memory. You're not fully aware of everything that's coming in. You're just paying attention to the important stuff. And right now I'm trying very hard to knock out that stuff, but it's sticking into my auditory sensory memory because it is so loud and pervasive. All right, so short-term memory is stored for a short period of time. It's where you actually work out, okay, what is important? What do I need to remember? And it's pretty much what you're looking at right now. If you're listening to me and actually paying attention, which I'm guessing is about 50% of you, you are going to be using your short-term memory and working out, all right, Miss Evans said this is important, I should put this into long-term memory. That's your short-term memory. Sometimes it's called working memory because you've got to work on it to get it to long term. Right, so information can be transferred from sensory to short term. However, sometimes it does bypass short term very, very quickly because it's very emotional, all that sort of stuff. Duration is usually 12 to 18 seconds. However, it can go up to 30. And some of you, I don't know where you got your numbers from in the last time we did something on this. I don't know where you got it. So 12 to 18 up to 30. And that's like in some cases. It has a limited capacity. So you can only go 7 plus or minus 2, which means 5 to 9, depending on the individual or situation. And that bit there where it says depending on the individual means that some people can actually go more, some people can only do less. But a majority of people are 5 to 9 items or 7 plus or minus 2. Information you lose is usually due to decay because you haven't used it in a while, or displacement. So the information, because I'm going through this so quickly, you could be experiencing displacement, which means that because I've gone from one topic to the next topic without giving the half an hour consolidation, this is why you need to go back over. I'm actually pushing out the previous information. But this is why you go over the PowerPoint again. To increase the capacity of short-term memory is chunking. Now that section, the second last paragraph, or sentence, whatever, they ask a lot. How can you increase the capacity of short-term memory? And that is chunking. Right? So you're chunking it into pieces. Also known as working memory. Like I said before, long-term memory is broken up into different types. It has unlimited or potentially unlimited capacity and perhaps forever, so potentially unlimited amount of time for duration. Explicit memory is when you know what it is. So let's say, for example, declarative is another word that they use. So declarative memory is when you can declare that fact or event. Right, so explicit gets broken down into episodic, and that's episodes in your life, and semantic memory are facts and knowledge. So an elephant has ears. That is a fact. Long-term memory, on the other side, for implicit memories, are things that you know how to do. Usually things that you don't know that you know. And that's usually broken down into procedural memory, so how to ride a bike, how to brush your teeth, and it's your motor skills. But classical conditioning also comes into this because you don't know, essentially, you didn't try to learn a phobia, right? You just learned it because, well, it was involuntary. Oh, there it is. So it is a type of implicit. This slide here, awesome. Please put it into your note. It's pretty much summarizes everything I just said in the most succinct way possible. So screenshot it and put it in. Alrighty. 245, 246. I was good. All right, I'm going to stop it there. We also did do this bit, so it'll be a different spot when we come back. Does anyone have any questions? I lost someone again. No? Any questions? Okay, well, I talked a lot. I'd like to go get a drink, non-alcoholic, because I'm cooked here, and it's still a school day. Please make sure you check your hurdle task. We will be doing some phobia-related stuff next week before the SAC on Thursday. In class, it's in class. If you have no questions, you are free to go. Have a lovely afternoon, and I'll see you Monday.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.